Thanks for joining us on Coast to Coast Pest Talk.
All right. Hey, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Coast to Coast Pest Talk. Not the Coast to Coast Pest Talk, just Coast to Coast Pest Talk. I'm your host, Gabe Seymour with Pest Patrol. I'm here with Andy Sinevsky with Perimetic Pest Management. And we are going to be discussing continuation on the professional distance subject that we were discussing last time. We're going to talk specifically about kind of how do you train your mind in this way and what's that look like. So let's jump on in here, Andy. Give us some tips. We talked about professional distance last week. How do we cultivate the correct kind of mindset here in that regard?
Yeah, I like how you added the Coast to Coast. It's like the Ohio State University all of a sudden.
Yes, that's right.
That's good.
The only one.
The only one. Yeah, so we ended up talking a bunch about professional distance and kind of like the right and wrong, the pitfalls, how are you too close, too far, what's the right balance to kind of strike. And one of the things we didn't really touch on is, okay, we both kind of agreed that if you don't have the right professional distance, you can develop it, but we didn't talk about anyway how to do that. And so I thought that would be something that we should probably touch on a little bit. So one of the things that we've worked on to sort of heighten professional distance here with our staff, and not increase distance necessarily, but heighten the application of it so that you're the correct distance, is actually sort of a mental exercise that I took from, believe it or not, a book from Japan from the 1700s. There's a book, Miyamoto Musashi wrote, Book of Five Rings, and it's how to train for samurais for sword fighting. And in that book, he talks about removing your mind from between your actions, your body and actions. So what he talks about is you'll have a span of time between noticing something and then reacting to that thing. And you want to have that time frame to be as small as possible. So they work towards making your reactions be instinctual. This is not unique to, say, sword fighting. This is in any sport. You train till it's an instinct. And what it got me thinking was, if you can remove that thought process, that rational brain between stimulus and action, you can do the opposite. And that's the real key to improving your emotional quotient and a proper professional distance. Because I think what causes the problems is the level at which you can have an intense interaction and maintain your rational thought and not become engaged emotionally with what's happening. That's a proper professional distance. For people that struggle with that, what they're really struggling with is the incident of the stimulus and then the reaction have almost no separation between them. So what I mean is, something happens, it makes you feel angry, you turn right around as angry. Like that emotion is just boom, instantaneous. And anyone is going to, even the most put together person that seems very stoic, like I can come off sometimes as sort of fairly rational and stoic and distant. You're still feeling things. Emotions happen. Somebody calls up and says, your service is garbage and we're going to cancel. I get a pit in my stomach like anybody else does, and you want to fight. Like right off the bat, you're like, oh, our service is the best. You immediately want to react like that. But what I've trained myself to do over the years is to allow that emotion to be observed and then recognize it for what it is. It's telling me something. It's telling me, oh, there's a threat here. And then it gives me even just a few seconds to go, okay, what really is the threat? What is this person really telling me? Are they telling me facts that I need to respond to factually? Are they talking about their emotions? They felt bad that, or they were scared of a mouse ran through their restaurant, let's say, or, they're worried about their brand being damaged by this thing, and they're emotionally reacting to that. If I then turn around and emotionally react right back to them, not having any distance, the whole thing's a mess. Now we're just two
Right.
like monkeys throwing stuff at each other. You're
Yeah.
reacting with that limbic brain, with that primitive reaction. So this has been something that we've worked on with our staff. Most notably my wife, which is super fun to, if you've ever tried to work on something like this with your wife, you can imagine how that starts off. Hey, hun, we're going to do this self-improvement thing. Fortunately we're still married, so it went okay.
Oh, well done.
Yeah. But it can take a little while, but it's about giving yourself time between the incident of something that could make you react emotionally and then the actual reaction that you have. Allow the emotion to happen in that gap, recognize it, and then react. We see this a lot too, like somebody calls in sick, or a technician does something and you want to be like, oh gosh, you're going to react really, really angrily. Have that space. Do you tend to react immediately when something happens, or do you give yourself like time? Do you take like a couple breaths? Do you have a mechanism?
I tend to be pretty level-headed, although I tend to see things very black and white. So
Okay.
if particularly if something happens over text, which is the worst, because then I see it, I have time to rip it apart. I don't like that because I'm an overthinker. But I don't tend to be like I'm gonna lash out and get all angry in the moment. But just to clarify, you're not saying that you shouldn't have any sort of emotion in your professional interactions. You're talking about having the correct type and amounts of emotion, right?
Absolutely. And that's the real key. If you are going to react just emotionally to anything that comes along, you're going to put yourself immediately in a disadvantaged state. So when the classic example is you have an upset customer and they come at you with all kinds of things, and it can be crazy things. What we train our guys and girls to hear when somebody comes at them with whatever the complaint may be, I say, whatever they say to you, what you need to hear is the words "I feel" in front of that. So if someone comes to you and says, because this will happen, you were here and you treated for XYZ problem, and now it's worse. What you did didn't do anything, and it just got worse and worse and worse. It's worse than it's ever been. Now, that's what they're reporting, and we know that that's not factually the case. We know that, okay, no, the treatment didn't get worse. It's way better. It's just still, it's now down to a trickle. Let's say they have a lingering problem, but we could quantify, oh, you had, 300 mice and now you got 10 mice, or whatever the case may be. But arguing those rational points back with them and getting into that level, allowing your emotions to drive that, is not going to convince them of anything. Now put I feel in front of all those comments. I feel like it didn't do anything. I feel like it's worse than it's ever been. What they're expressing in a very ineffective way is that they're stressed and they're frustrated. And most of the time, what I will answer with that is, I really understand that you're frustrated by this. I really understand what you're saying. Because I'm understanding through their poor verbal communications to what they're actually meaning. And then that conversation can be a much different conversation. But allowing that time, because I will have the immediate reaction just like anybody else would. If somebody came up, and the one that gets me the worst, that if you want to get me emotional and like, oh my gosh, you tell me like we're terrible and our guys suck and they're, the technician was terrible and blah, blah, blah. I mean, immediately I want to fight. I just want to like yell at someone and all those things. And it's okay to feel those, because we have to recognize what those feelings are telling me. What those feelings are telling me is I have a high level of, I want to defend. I'm very, and we have a girl on our staff that's like this. She's high level defense. She really wants to defend, and she'll circle the wagons. And I'm sort of the same way. I want to defend our people, and that's okay. And you can feel those things, but you need to give that couple beats to let that settle, and then really realize what is happening, and then have a conversation. And those first things that you say back to that customer, and I didn't mean this to be like a customer service type tips or whatever, but it has to address them on an emotional level because they're speaking on an emotional level. Right. And the same thing happens when you have people that aren't practicing good professional distance internally. If they're talking to, say, their boss or manager or whatever on an extremely emotional level, you can't come back to them with facts and figures because your emotional processing parts of your mind do not hear those. They're just, those don't work.
Yep.
What you're saying when you say back a rational, quantifiable, data-based, response is you're saying, I don't hear your emotions. I don't recognize them. I don't really care. And here's why you're wrong. And that is not a recipe for any kind of resolution.
Yeah.
So that's what we've really worked on, though, is like reframing what that stimulus is and then creating some of that time separation. Another good technique that we train our people on is to restate back to someone when they're speaking to you emotionally what they just said to you. And what that provides you, it provides them the opportunity to recount their feelings and feel that they are getting their say. They're able to let that all out. But what it provides you is time to allow your emotional state to settle. Because if they just came at and attacked you with something, you go, let me just be clear with what you're saying. What I'm hearing is this. Is that correct? Is there anything more? And in that, it's easy for me just to restate that. I'm just saying what I don't have to think about it. I can be mad and say what you just said to me.
Right.
Oh, is it this, and this? And then they get to talk about it. I get another beat to sit there and process and hear their whole thing again, put in the I feels, adding to what they were saying. Oh, I feel this. I feel that. Okay. And then come back. I think that's probably one of the best ways to develop this. And it can become almost second nature where you just start to do this. And again, with my wife, she's learned these tricks. So while they worked really well at home initially, they don't work as well once she knows what I'm doing. And not that they don't work, but when she's mad about the dishwasher didn't get unloaded, and I say, what I'm hearing from you is that you didn't like that the dishwasher doesn't get unloaded. Yeah, that's that doesn't make anything better. So just a word of warning on that.
Yeah, totally. Oh, that's so funny. That reminds me of my old CEO and I. We would get in a lot of fights because we saw things very differently. And he's great. He's a fantastic businessman. But and when I would get into arguments with my wife and she'd say, "Don't talk to me like you talk to your CEO." I remember hearing, I don't know where it's from, but it was something talking about like in debates. If you want to know that you're ready to actually debate someone, it's when you can correctly state their side back to them in a way that they agree with.
Yeah.
And then you're in a place where you're not straw manning them. You're not, like overly emotionally stating or exaggerating their side. You're rationally, truthfully stating kind of what you said, that like repeating back what they're feeling, what they're angry about. Yeah, it's interesting being able to do that before you ever even begin engaging.
Yeah. And it really does help to bring their emotional level down. It gives them that same time to like, now they restate that. They hear it then 3 times. They have the emotional initial, incident. Then you restate it to them. They hear it back. Okay. He heard me. Then they restate it again, maybe add some more context to it or whatever. They heard it 3 times. They went, okay. And sometimes people need to have that time, and then they can pull back from, that emotional state. And yet now you can start to go, okay, well, here's what we're going to do about this. Here's what my thoughts are on here. What are your thoughts? And then I think a lot of times people being listened to is just extraordinary these days already. Like the fact that, someone's actually going to take the time to listen to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And to tie that into my $1 million word that I brought up last time that you hadn't heard since George Bush, gravitas. I think
Yep.
there's an aspect of that where you're being calm and you're helping pull those around you that are maybe less emotionally stable into the calm, that you're setting the temperature for the conversation.
Yeah. Yep.
And yeah, I think that's incredibly important.
Now, that's, if I could just jump in right there.
Yeah.
That is a good point, because you're kind of the center of the storm as the owner,
Yes.
founder, head person and whatnot. And you can't be stormy. Like, you got to be that rock that's really stable, because everyone else's emotional stability and their ability to maintain professional distance and to do the right thing in really tough situations really depends on that leader to have that right. I mean, if you go into battle and your leader there of your platoon or whatever is like, oh my God, I'm terrified and blah, 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 you have no chance. You have absolutely no chance. You got to stand in the fire and suffer the slings and arrows, not to quote Little Shakespeare.
That's right.
We quoted 17th century Japanese literature. Why not a little European too?
And the opposite is true as well, that when you are filled with chaos and craziness, it causes those around you under your care to also be. But when you're strong, resolute, filled with courage, filled with kindness, it does the same thing. It encourages your team. It gives them motivation, gives them vision. That's a good segue into, I think, your favorite term. Am I right? Servant leadership.
I think this was your thing. I said servant leadership, and I think that you had smoke come out of your ears. I
started twitching a little bit.
Yeah. So what is the deal with servant leadership for you? What?
I mean, I love servant leader. I thought that it was, no, just kidding.
It's kind of the hip phrase now, right? That's right. We hear that everywhere, and I don't know that I've heard somebody really kind of define it. What is it that rubs you the wrong way, or your perception of it?
Yeah. So I hear it a lot. I'm a Christian, so I hear it in the Christian business world, right? Where it's be like Jesus, because Jesus was a servant, and he and a lot of it's really, really well-meaning. I think there's a lot of wisdom and truth in the servant leadership world. The thing that rubs me wrong about it is that take Jesus, for example. Jesus really, truly was a servant. He served those around him. He died for them. But Jesus is the king of the universe. He's ruling as a king. He's not going around bowing down before everybody as their servant. He's a good and gracious king. He's a ruler. And I think if we're going to emulate something, you emulate a good king. And fortunately, we have lots of those throughout history. There's lots of bad kings, but there have been lots of good kings and rulers. And I think I prefer the term rulership. I think if you said servant rulership, I think that would actually denote more what I think is the true nature of servant leadership. Servant leadership to me feels kind of like limp-wristed, that type of thing. So that's what rubs me wrong.
Okay, so I think a lot of people maybe take it as the leader, the boss is going to be get everybody coffee and help them. When somebody calls in sick, he jumps in and does their work. Or I don't know, it waits on everybody hand and foot. That's what I hear when I hear servant leadership. And I think I hear that when people describe incidences of good servant leadership or bad servant leadership, it's a lot of times in that sort of context. What are you doing for me?
Yes.
Sort of thing. I don't think that that's accurate to what we're trying to express, the phenomenon that we're trying to put our finger on when we say servant leadership.
Yeah.
And it comes up here in this because I think it has to do with a form of professional distance, which is a little off the rails, but we tend to be off the rails here. So
Yeah,
we'll just stay there. We don't have rails. We just do our thing.
We're in a spaceship.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So I think that a servant leader is someone, and we probably need to coin a different phrase, but I think what is actually happening, a servant leader doesn't have to be somebody that's weak and is doing stuff for other people. I think how he is serving the people in his charge or her charge is that they're creating a space and a professional distance between themselves and the undertow of the mythological narrative of your company, the culture of your company. And what I mean by that is, instead of them being the subject and hero of that story of the company, of even if you're just a division of a company and your job is you're head of sales, and the head of sales is right there, like holding with an iron fist the success of his sales team as his achievement. He doesn't have any distance between the story of what that sales team did and himself. He's on top of it. He allows no space for the rest of that sales team to be the subject and the hero of their success. And I think that's the real nugget of what a servant leader does. They lead the team, but they are not the team, and they lead towards whatever their victory is going to be, but they don't own that victory. That victory is owned by everyone else. And that is the distance. They have to create this distance between themselves and the mission that they're on. And it's any success is the team's success. I think this is the nut of what Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great talks about when he says the window or the mirror. In his analogy, he says a great leader, a level 5 leader, if you haven't read Good to Great, you should read Good to Great, looks out the window to apportion credit to things. And he looks in the mirror to apportion blame. And I think this is what is actually happening, is that there's a professional distance between those successes and that leader. He doesn't own the success. Everyone else owns the success. So you can be a hard leader. You can drive people. You can demand the best of them. You can have accountability, but you have this space where you go, you did that. You all did that. That's your success. And I think that if you have this distance and you combine it with empathy in that leader, you have what we think of as a servant leader, but probably not a good term. That I think the term leads us astray, because I think this is what's actually going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. That quote, it was that Jim Collins.
Yeah. Yep.
Leaders, they look in the mirror for blame, and they look outwards at their team for we all did this. What I think of, to just take it very simply, is taking responsibility.
Sure.
Right. So like something breaks that was not your fault at all. Who's going to take responsibility?
Yeah.
The leader takes responsibility, even if it wasn't even his fault. He takes the responsibility, but then when things go great, is the leader saying, haha, look at how good? No, you push out and that's just loving other people,
Sure. Now, would you think though that a leader that especially at the smaller ranks of a company where you're starting out more of their ego, say as the founder, is tied up into that company, and they're tied up into the story of their own success, and it boxes out everyone else, and then they have trouble finding people that'll follow them. How do I learn leadership? How do I get people to follow me? How do I get, they don't buy in? Because you've held it all for yourself. All the glory is yours, and you are the only one that can achieve, and everyone else is pushed to the side. I think that you don't have that separation. And I think as you grow, you should learn that through the stages of a company's growth, where you can separate yourself out. I had today, one of my technicians got their first tip, and she came back and was super excited. She almost gave me the money. She's like, can we get,
As she should
customer?
have.
I said, yes, exactly. I'll take that. No. So she got a tip, and these types of things are where you, as you mature in a company, those are great. That's her win. She did that.
That's right.
It's her thing. All I did was point her in a direction and send her on a path. And then she won that. I could see where other people would be like, well, I could have been there. I could have got that tip and I would have done it better. And, all those things, that subjugation of your ego and separation from your business as being like you, an extension of you, is something you have to develop into to get to that leadership level. But yeah, we need to probably recoin a phrase, because I think it leads people astray when you hear servant leader. I don't think it's accurate.
Absolutely. And I think it's well-intentioned. I think the heart of what people are trying to get at. But I agree. I think it's not the most helpful term. What's interesting, I was just thinking about the example, you're leading the company and you've got a team member that gets a tip, and you, again, like, in a sense, it's still your win, right? The customer is still happy and stuff. But you're teaching your team how to be a servant leader in how you respond in that moment, right? Yep. When you just say, great job, you crushed it. Enjoy that tip. Really good job. Thanks for serving the customers. Then as that team member, if they grow into maybe a management position, you're teaching them how are they going to relate to those underneath their authority as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty neat. And I really kind of started thinking about this in the last week, like after I was reviewing some of our discussions before from last week on professional distance, and I was like, oh my gosh, I see this. I see this right here. Now, you don't strike me as one. Have you been too wrapped up tight in your, like, the ego with your company? Yeah.
No, I love the company, but for me, kind of like what you and I talked about earlier in the podcast, the reason why I start companies is because I'll just die if I don't. I'm either going to like sit alone in a straitjacket in a room, or I'm going to start companies. And so I'm like, I love Pest Patrol. If it's not Pest Patrol, it's going to be whatever the next thing is. So no, I'm not like overly jealous about this is like me. And I think that is a blessing to the team. I think the team feels a weight of their own responsibility for the business as well. Yeah. And taking that initiative and stuff. Because I'm pretty open-handed with stuff. Like the team, each of the team members have tremendous responsibility, and we don't have we don't have an office yet. Oh, right. Wow. So all my stuff is remote, right? So the guys, they have their trucks, they take them home, they're fully stocked with everything they need. Now we have a garage where they'll come every week or two and restock, but so there's just a lot more autonomy happening.
Yeah. So then if we can summarize our conceptual idea for a leader for their professional distance, they're not only having to keep a proper professional distance from the staff and engage in that at the right, be able to gauge that distance from their customer base. We talked a little bit about that, about how close with a customer and going through some of those transitions as you grow, and but also from their own company, a proper professional distance from their ego and themselves from the company that they built and this machine that's moving forward. So it's a lot more difficult than I think people recognize when they think like, oh, professional distance. Yeah, I don't get too chummy with my staff so that I can fire them. Like that's the extent that people think their professional distance understanding. Right. Like that's the whole of it.
Yeah. And in reality, it's more something akin to, if you want to actually be able to scale a successful business in any degree, you have to learn this.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Awesome.
That's great. All right, let's close this out. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Coast Pest Talk. Follow us on YouTube. Also, if you're listening through a podcast catcher, Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave us a review because that greatly helps other people find us and make sure that they know that this is an awesome podcast. Thanks for listening. As always, go rocket.